After 2 years of travelling bans and the absence of international business events, Meetings Africa is back for its 17th edition. Meetings Africa 2022 kickstarted this week under the theme Shared Minds, Shared Economies, as post-pandemic economic recovery and renewal brings a global and African perspective to restart economies after the impact of COVID-19.
So Amanda, you are Chief Convention Bureau Officer. What I'd love to hear from you is how can we as Africa, how can we capitalize, optimize and leverage positioning Africa as a destination for business events?
I think by communicating that, and telling the world of our successes, because I don't believe that we actually blow our horn enough. I think that is it's really something, I think as Africans, it's part of our DNA that we are not forward, We always are like, and I think we need to be very bold. And, for me, something like a Meetings Africa, like this event, is a bold step. Whilst the whole world cancelled events, we just went ahead. I remember when I got the call to say that one of the biggest tourism trade shows, in the world that happened in Berlin just a week after us, ITB, when they said that they cancel their physical event. And I thought my heart sank and I thought, so are we cancelling Meetings Africa? And that is Africa. We are bold, but the world doesn't know it. I think we need to communicate that we are a safe destination. People are looking at us and think that, can we, do we have the medical facilities? And if I think of the South African Events Council really work very close with us to make sure that we have policies and procedures in place, and also to make it as simple as possible. And that unexpected thing of Africa, where we are actually so savvy with technology. I mean, you get your QR code beforehand. There's no queue. We have it all, and we just need to tell that story. We need to go out and tell the world. I always wonder how many World Cups must we again, present to the world to show that we can be, successful in big events, and that is across the continent. You can go anywhere. People or the convention bureaus that can assist them. So for me it is, and of course then bidding. We need to bid. We need to really go after these meetings and support each other. When one of our countries put up their hand for a big event.
Exactly, and the football is actually a great example, the World Cup. But South Africa has a convention bureau, but not all countries do, and some are still in their infancy. So how can we work together as a continent to help build capacity for being able to bid and to bring over these large-scale business events?
I think we are really at a stage where we, COVID kind of halted a little bit, but we're at the stage where we want to talk about, and we did it before COVID, where we want to talk about how do we come together and actually market together. So like, for instance, we did a fantastic dinner, in London, between ourselves and Rwanda and Kenya, and bring those buyers together. And like I said, co-opetition, and that we can understand that it is better to work together than just to compete. But I think what for me is about building capacity. We need to get young people. Here at Meetings Africa, we have a leadership forum that we are for the past 5, 6, 7 years we had it. And this year again, where we bring the next generation. The students that are actually doing tourism and events to come and have the practical experience of what it means. And not just South Africa, the whole continent. So that for me is that we need to come together, work together, advancing Africa together, and help where we can, and I can just my personal journey, when I was the Cape Town Convention Bureau, I already that time work with Durban and already that time work with Gauteng and Johannesburg, not knowing that I would sit and, we will set up a national convention bureau. And that for me is the, of the beauty of that co-opetition is that we need to collaborate and come together. Money in a pot is much more than my R1 or $1 at a time.
That's a very good point. And when we look at the continent specifically, we have so much to offer besides money. What are some of these things?
I think unique experiences. I definitely think authenticity. We are still an authentic destination. The continent is an authentic destination. It's not pretense. It's really honest and true. And when we had a discussion with our buyers before we decide to have this event, that is what they said. We want to come back to Africa to taste that authenticity. So our cultures, our food, because what is events about? Events is about networking. And where did networking start? I'm telling you, here in this continent. If we talk about Ubuntu, we talk about Indabas, it's just words that really culminate and say this is what it's all about. And so for me, we can definitely, we're a continent that can come up with fantastic solutions. We're a continent that has extreme innovative ideas. Innovation is part of our DNA. When you are in a continent or a country where everything just works smoothly, you don't need to come up with a solution. And that is why Africa is so dynamic, when it's coming to this sector.
We obviously have been talking about positioning Africa as a destination for business events. But from a Gauteng positioning, how are you positioning Gauteng within the business events industry?
That's an interesting, because I was part of the panel where we were actually having that topic of how do we actually change the narrative around Brand Africa. One of the things that I said from a Gauteng point of view, we said we want to stop talking, but we're going to start actioning, right? So one of the things that we're going to advance is the Africa Free Trade Agreement. We have entered into an MOU with Ghana, so we're going to now start doing business with Ghana. We are now finalizing our relations with Botswana. We're going to start doing business in Botswana. What do I mean by that? It's both from tourism point of view. You can talk leisure, but also you can talk business events from an eventing point of view, and just normal trade and industry. As Gauteng government, we are guided by the provincial strategy called Growing Gauteng Together 2030. One of the key things that we talk about that strategy is that it identifies 10 key high growth sectors. And these key, 10 key high growth sectors is what we focus on in terms of driving economic recovery of Gauteng, but also creating jobs. And if you look at a platform such as Meetings Africa, it affords us that opportunity, because we're actually coming here not just as South Africa or as Gauteng, but we're coming as a continent, and we're inviting the world into our continent to understand who we are, to actually tell the narrative of who we are. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we're doing as Gauteng is that we're going to now increase our level of bidding and hosting of events, because we believe events are a catalyst for moving people, but also growing the economy and creating much more needed jobs. If you talk about business events environment specifically, we know that we also contribute to the knowledge economy. From a Gauteng point of view, when you look at the 10 high growth sectors, we're talking about automotive, for example. I always brag and say, just be on the lookout. Gauteng will be producing the next Ford Ranger that would be actually exporting to the rest of the world. That's a good story to tell. And I always brag to say the mid-ear transplant that was done by the professor from South Africa he's the head of ENT at Steve Biko, and it's here in Gauteng. I always brag telling people that you actually 35% of the GDP, Gauteng accounts for that. So we are better, positioned to actually take our space around, business events. But as for the narrative around Brand Africa, I think it's important for us to actually strengthen our partnership with media, because I think media plays an important role in giving that objective narrative. And if we partner with media to say, this is how we want to show up to the rest of the world, please begin to actually narrate our African story from our lens as well as Africans. I think it begins to actually change people's perceptions about what they think about the Brand Africa. The second thing that we spoke about is we do not celebrate the products and the properties that we have, as a continent enough. For example, Let's take the COVID pandemic. When the pandemic hit the world, everybody thought, oh, Africa is not ready. Africa is not going to cope. The hospitals, oh my God, this and that, the poverty there, it's cramped. Guess what? It hit other continents. But we never tell that story of how Africa actually survived this very deadly pandemic. And other continents have seen the West. At some point they said millions of graves will be in Africa. We have not seen millions of graves. We think that is a narrative that needs to go out there to start positioning Destination Africa as that continent that, we've got this. We're able to actually manage at a bigger scale, which also says our risk engines are working in a sense that it didn't have the huge impact that everybody was waiting for the continent. So those are some of the things that we were talking about. And how do we then limit or lessen the protocols of communication, wherein if there's a crisis, at what point do we all wait for someone who's in a position of power to actually say something? So that is the thing that makes the trust between media and sectors to weaken. So we need to actually put those reputational management strategies in place, those crisis communication frameworks in place, so that we know when a matter hits, who speaks? Can the destination, defend itself? Can the continent defend itself outside, the stringent protocols that we are used to? So those are some of the things that we discussed this morning. And I think as Gauteng, as a destination, we're saying we mean business. These are the areas that we're going to look at and dial up and ensure that we strengthen our position within the continent, particularly in doing business in the continent to strengthen our brand Africa.
I really like what you're saying there, and particularly on the notion of working with the media. And you mentioned that you've just signed an MOU with Ghana. Now, Ghana had an fantastic campaign, the Year of the Return. And, what we really saw was using a campaign that had economic repercussions whilst it was a cultural campaign. Now, from a Gauteng perspective, what are some of the narratives that you're going to be driving?
So that's a perfect example. If you look at events, so at a center of our strategy as a province, we're going to increase our bidding and hosting so that we actually, attract a lot of bigger, impactful events. Events in their nature have got a huge economic potential. So, for example, an event like this, if you go around just as precinct looking for accommodation, you won't find it because it's fully booked, right? So that's the nature of event. But also, if you look at some of the suppliers who are walking around the exhibition space, those are small businesses that are actually supplying to these big events, and that's a narrative that we never tell within the value chain. From a Gauteng point of view, we manage our events calendar very tightly. So there are other lifestyle events, sporting events which we are attracting into the destination, which are going to obviously create much more needed job and also contribute to the economy. For example, a couple of weeks back we just hosted a 9-hour Kyalami race, wherein, just to give you an example, that race happened in Kyalami here in Midrand, here in Gauteng. 1,700 young people were employed that have not been employed over the 2 years of COVID. 600 SMEs, suppliers, small suppliers, were part of just staging Kyalami 9-hour. So we've got our calendar full, and we're seeing some of the signature events coming back. We know that in September we've got Joy of Jazz, we've got the DSTV Delicious. Those are some of the events that anchor other business events that are happening. We have just won the Africa qualifiers for the Netball World Cup. It's happening in Gauteng, so the continent will also converge in Gauteng. But what it means is the transport industry would benefit from it. The accommodation sector will benefit from it. Restaurants will benefit. And it's not the businesses only. Jobs will be created. Just to stage that kind of an event, you need people who are unemployed to come in. So temporary jobs, we're going to see temporary jobs, in there. And we're going to see SME, small businesses, getting an opportunity to participate in the economy. So that's at the center of our strategy as Gauteng.
As Africans, we need to open the borders so that we are able to host these events amongst ourselves, but also to create the economic benefits.
On the panel discussion, you were talking about collaboration between local and global for protocols. Do you mind expanding on that a little bit?
Yes, I mean, what I meant is that if you look at the way associations are structured, first of all, they get organized at a local level, So it could be at a community level, or it could be at a national level. And then once they have those national conversations, the natural movement is towards creating a regional association that actually encompasses national associations from the different countries within a region. And mostly what we've seen, that takes the form of the regional economic blocks. So you'll have probably SADC countries that come together, or in East Africa, you've got the East Africa community countries, or in West Africa, ECOWAS sort of like country. And then once they congregate at the regional level, then the next level they move at is to be able to create Pan-African associations that bring together associations from different countries within Africa. And thereafter, it's important for these associations to be able then to tap into the international or into the world, umbrella bodies. And that allows the movement of ideas, the movement of that collaborations from a local level all the way to the international level. Yeah, and that's very important for an association, because what it does is that it helps to sort of like bring the global thoughts straight to the local level, and professionalize a lot of the conversation and the work that associations do at that level. So it's very important to be able to have that nexus from the local to the international space.
So I want to stick to the association. There is a form of a rarity that we need to tap into that can springboard us into bringing the community together, and also for us to expand a bit. What are that association that you're talking about?
So I think I did mention that the primary reason why associations are created is because there's a common good. There's a common there's a common desire and a common vision and a common mission that brings them together. And so the uniqueness of the association that I was referring to, the African Society of Association Executives, is unique because what it does is that it brings together individuals that work with associations and also volunteer leaders in associations to be able to build their capacity so that they can effectively manage associations. Associations are very fragile, organization. Yeah, because they are largely managed by volunteers. And so you need specialized skills to be able to understand how do you manage these relationships amongst these volunteers to ensure that the mission of that particular association is obtained. And therefore, we found it important to be able to invest in building the capacity of those individuals that are tasked with the responsibility of growing associations. Now, once that is done, you're going to see an emergence of very, very strong associations that are able to compete at an international level. Yeah? And it's only once they are able to compete at an international level that they are able to bring and bid for international meetings to be able to bring those meetings into Africa. Yeah, so that's the uniqueness about these associations that I was speaking about. Yeah, yeah.
And lastly, what barriers are there for growth in the industry, and how can we overcome these barriers?
The main aim of associations is to bring people together. Now, for people to come together, there is need for mobility. They need to move from one place to the other. And one of the challenges we still see a lot in Africa is that mobility of people, the ability of people to move from one destination into the other. And there are a couple of barriers there. Number one, there are no flights, or there are very few flights that connect Africa together. Number two, where they exist, they are very expensive. So they are unaffordable. Many people can't afford them. So we need to look at how do we make flying across Africa affordable. And then number 3 is a requirement of visas and passports to be able to cross these borders, and that is not only a costly affair, but also it just puts an unnecessary burden to travel. And so we need to look at those barriers to be able to ensure that the movement of people across the continent is easier. And it's just not about movement of people. It's also about movement of goods. It's also about movement of services. Because remember what associations represent. They represent entities that actually trade in goods and services. So we need to be able to make it easier to move these services from one part of Africa to the next part of Africa. And I'll give you an example. I do a lot of association meetings, and part of the skills that we require for these associations is technology and printing services that are quite affordable here in South Africa. So if I need to hire or that service into South Africa, into a place like Kenya where I come from, it's very expensive. So we need to be able to make it easier, to trade across the African countries, and that will see a lot of conversations happening amongst Africans.
Tell us, you obviously work for TKZN. What is the significance of an event such as Meetings Africa for the wider Business Events Africa narrative?
You see, for us, being here at Meetings Africa is very important because we get an opportunity to engage with the buyers from Africa and around the world in terms of lobbying for future business events to come to the destination of KwaZulu-Natal. As you know, KwaZulu-Natal is the business events destination. That's what we name our Durban as the playground. So we would like to be here and also to engage with the buyers so that they can come to the destination and host their business events in KwaZulu-Natal. So for us, being here is a great opportunity, especially after the COVID-19. It's been over 2 years since we've engaged in this nature of business. So for us to be here is a great opportunity then to reignite the industry and to say KZN is open for business events.
And how important is it for Africa to leverage the opportunity that is business events?
Well, it is important for Africa because we are saying we are traveling within Africa to create opportunities for Africa to trade amongst themselves. So for us as Africans, we need to open the borders so that we are able to host these events amongst ourselves, but also to create the economic benefits in the continent of Africa, because as we host these business meetings, we are then in turn create job opportunities, create a space for SMME to thrive in their businesses, and also in terms of developing the industry as a whole, in terms of making sure that jobs that were lost during COVID-19 are reignited and people can also benefit in terms of hosting these business meetings.
And what still needs to happen to fully maximize the opportunities that exist on the continent in terms of business events?
You see, for me, as I'm talking about intra-Africa trade, it is important for us to learn to work together as the continent of Africa and not rely on other countries outside of Africa, so that we can build our own business events and build our own economies as Africa, as a continent. For me, what I've learned so much in November when we were hosting the Intra-African Trade Fair in Durban, where we saw so many people from Africa doing business, it actually opened our eyes in terms of us trading amongst ourselves and the importance of doing business in Africa, because then in turn you know that it is easy for us to leverage on the opportunities that Africa has. I think we take ourselves for granted that Africa is really so rich in terms of opportunities, economically and otherwise. So we need to make sure that we leverage on those opportunities and we tap into those opportunities and grow our industry, not only on business events, but all other industries, in terms of making sure that we trade amongst ourselves as Africa as a continent.